Hey there, Bloomers and friends. Rev Kev coming to you back behind the desk this week. I am here in the office. As I'm sure you might have received a notice from me in email, as well as you can read in Bloom Notes today. You know, kind of sad today as we remember the life of Joe Ramsey among us. Joe has been ill for a fairly substantial period of time, but more intensely for the last few months, and he passed away in the night. And it's just been a little. It's very saddening, of course, not as much for me as it is for Phyllis and for the family, but it's just something to take in mind that even in the midst of all that we are experiencing now with Joe did not have an underlying COVID factor going on. I mean, he had the underlying factors, but that was not a part of his diagnosis. With the COVID-19 pandemic, turning our lives topsy-turvy, and with the current events that are happening of riots and brutality and looting and protests and national debate. It's amazing that even in the midst of that, these kinds of things happen where babies are born and people die. And in the midst of all of that, we are here with God's love to care for people throughout it. And I continue to be amazed at the incredible aspects of life that just keep going, even as we're in the midst of some very, very tumultuous times in our country. I just got off a Zoom call. That isn't even novel to say anymore, but I just got off a Zoom meeting with people from our annual conference, Southern California Nevada Conference. And it was basically a discussion among clergy and lay people about racism. And we had people from San Diego, from Las Vegas, from Los Angeles, from San Bernardino, and little old me out here in Palm Springs, and talking about what's going on in people's lives. And, in this, there were black and white and brown people on this conversation, men and women, gay and straight, lesbian, transgender, all people, and the thing about it is that in the midst of those latter diversity aspects, there were color diversity aspects going on, and as one of the persons so aptly pointed out, somebody, by the way, noting that he himself was from Eastern Kentucky, it is and he pointed out it's a completely different kind of discussion for those of us in Southern California than it is for people in Eastern Kentucky. We have this kind of diversity that I just described in way, almost like it feels like more intensity than many other parts of the country that are having the same kinds of dialogues. So it caused me to realize that if we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this, that is totally appropriate. I think I've mentioned this before, but don't let yourself get down because you feel down. It's okay because there is a magnitude going on, like something I haven't experienced for a really long time in my life. Just think about it. This is an international situation going on, both in the response to brutality and racism as well as the pandemic. It's a national experience, it's a regional experience, it's a state experience, it's a local experience, and it's a self experience. I'm going to make a confession now. An aspect of my racism is the fact that I'll say in this little self-confession, I'm feeling some grief about the fact that Quaker Oats is deciding to retire Aunt Jemima as a brand. That is, as a kid that grew up loving pancakes, Aunt Jemima was a sign of goodness in my life, in the sense of that was something that was important to me. But that was a little white boy, not understanding that the Aunt Jemima image is a perpetuation of the Mammy image of the three kinds of racist images of black women of Mammy, Sapphire, or Jezebel that have been perpetuated since the Civil War and before. But I didn't know that. And so I've got this deeply down in me, this affection for pancake mix, Aunt Jemima pancake mix and Aunt Jemima syrup, that makes me sad today. So the good thing about that is that I am able to know that that's going on in myself. So I can check to understand that while that's an experience that I'm having, I cannot use that experience to discount the fact that that's been a racist image all along. And that's been most likely offensive to people I know and love, for their whole lives, just as it's been something that I liked my whole life. That's the dichotomy. That's the differences of culture. Remember that all of us are like icebergs. There's a little bit of us showing above the water, but underneath the water there's a whole lot of culture, and there's a lot of times when those icebergs, that culture bumps, under the water, and that's what a lot of us are experiencing now. When some people feel one way and others feel another way, it can be the fact, and they don't understand why they see things differently. It's because that culture is bumping under the water, this experience that we have. And it's important for us to be able to check ourselves so that when we can know what's going on, so that we know how we're reacting in our city, in our state, in our region, in our country, and all around the globe when we see what's going on. Because actually there's different kinds of cultural aspects happening all around, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are oppressing other people and basically saying you shouldn't feel oppressed. But that is not the way, that's not a valid response. The response is, how are you oppressed, and how can we bring relief? How can we lift that oppression? And I, as an individual on a very local basis, can ask that same question. We here in Palm Springs have a racist history, both in the way in which Native Americans were treated at certain times in the history of this area when people came and began settling here. And the other factor that we have is the way in which there's a racist history as the way in which African Americans were treated with the whole Section 14 debacle that resulted in Palm Springs for a period of time having only two neighborhoods, one on the north side, one on the south side, where black people could buy property. So this is the kind of thing that goes on, and so if you feel like it's big, you're right, it's big. So one of the things we can do as white people is we can try to educate ourselves, and that's something I'm going to do by reading this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I've had this book for almost 6 months, and I'm wanting to make the commitment to read it now, and you can hold me to that. And maybe you can find something in your own reading or in your own experience or in a YouTube video or some way in which we can all do our own work to try to be an anti-racist, not just not racist, but be an anti-racist. Jesus says, love one another, for that's how people will know you are my disciples, how you love one another. And let that be the understanding that we do this work because we want to love one another even more authentically. So I leave you with that. This Sunday for Bloom is a combination. It is Father's Day, and we will note that. It's also 2 days after Juneteenth. And as a Bloom congregation, we have done our best to, done our best isn't the right phrase. We have observed Juneteenth from the beginning so that we have an understanding that there's more to culture than what many of us have basically had throughout our whole lives. So we hope you're with us on Sunday. We're going to have some special music from Wisconsin, see how that goes, and it'll be a great time together. Hope you'll be with us. If you can't be with us online, either on Facebook Live or on YouTube, we hope you can be with us in spirit. And as always, please keep us all in your prayers.